in
Right.
Kansas City?
It was just in Kansas City. It was the first place that they'd done it. But if that's the case, I'm not gonna pay them $300 to install the service if they can turn around a week later and cancel it.
All right,
Fuck you. Yeah.
let's get started. First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. There's some new faces here, so I'll quickly go through the ground rules. Pretty straightforward. So we're doing lightning talks, so they should be fast. We probably don't have that many talks today though, so we don't need to be too strict on time. But usually we have a limit at 10-minute mark, and we actually have a timer that runs on that screen back there. But like I said, today we're a little light on talks, so we'll just get in what we can and not worry about it very much. Topics. So it's called Open Source Open Mic. So the topics are about open source technologies, or open source data, or open source hardware, or whatever. It's not a super strict rule. Anything that you can loosely associate with open source, good to go. We're mostly here to learn cool stuff. And questions. Since we're trying to go kind of rapid on the talks, if you have questions, just hold your question until the end of the talk, and we'll take the questions then. And if your question is super specific to something that only you're going to care about, well, just talk to the speaker after on a one-on-one. And let's have fun. So I'll just go ahead and do my talk first. I didn't prepare slides this time for my talk. I'm just kind of wing it. It's more of a show and tell. I'm talking about Leaflet, which is if you were here last time, I talked about OpenStreetMaps, so this is kind of a nice follow-on to that. Leaflet is an open source JavaScript library for maps. It's mobile friendly, so it works really well on mobile, but it also works on desktop, obviously. Change my mouse. One thing that's really cool about Leaflet is it's agnostic to what tiles you render. So map tile servers follow like a convention. You have a zoom level and you have XY coordinates of your tile, and all the tiles are pretty much 256 by 256 pixels. So with Leaflet, when you set up a map, one of the first things you do is you add a tile layer to it usually, and you give it the pattern of your URL.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this code here, just these few lines, does this map that's above. Super easy. You can get a marker on there. It has a little tooltip. You can put HTML in that tooltip. Cool stuff. The tile layer, you put a template URL structure. You can it'll hit multiple subdomains to like kind of evenly distribute the traffic. There's a zoom level, which you can define the min and max zoom level that the tile server supports. And then these X and Y coordinates are computed based on the lat longs that are in view. And then this just shows how to add a marker to the map, the lat long. So if you ever need to do a map, I highly recommend Leaflet. Tutorials and documentation are all great. I'm not going to really dig into the API of Leaflet right now, since it's a lightning talk. I'm going to show what I've done myself with Leaflet. But first, another thing about those tile servers. There's a cool site called, there's a plugin for Leaflet called Leaflet Providers. And this site here shows you all the different, not all the different, but a lot of the different tiles that are available. So you can quickly come and pick a style that suits the map that you're trying to build. And it even gives you the JavaScript right here that you would copy and just pop it in and you got that style on your map. Super cool. whoa. It's like, it's called spinal map. It's weird. There's some dark themes. There's aerial views. Lots of cool stuff. And I think most of the ones listed on this site are free to use. So, makes it really easy to make some nice, pretty maps very easily. So, recently I stumbled on this giant data source, geospatial data source of, and you may have seen this online before, people analyzing this data. The New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission releases all the data for all the taxi rides for the past several years for both the yellow taxis and the green taxis. I think the green ones are like, does anyone know what the green ones are?
They can go outside of Lower Manhattan.
Outside the main city. Anyway, what I did is, and for all of these records, they give you the pickup location, the drop-off location, what time the pickup occurred, what time the drop-off occurred, the fare, the tip, the payment method used, all kinds of cool information. The number of passengers. But I just wanted to, well, here's what I did. This is a leaflet map. I picked a nice kind of desaturated map tile so I could show my data on the map and not be like distracting. So what I did here is I pre-processed all of the taxi rides from January through June of 2015. There were 77 million of them. And I pre-processed them into this little block grid. And what you can do in this leaflet map is click anywhere on the map, and it shows you where people took a cab ride to from that point that you clicked. So you can kind of see the distribution of, and it's cool because there's like highlights over here on LaGuardia. You click there, people go everywhere from there basically. And JFK has a lot. But pretty much everything is in Manhattan for the most part. Another thing that's kind of cool is if you click on an avenue, you kind of see that people stick on that avenue up and down Manhattan. Just kind of interesting pattern. But it's fun to click around here and kind of see interesting patterns. Like, I don't know what's here in this hotspot. And then what I wanted to do was show some time components. So over here on the left, I broke it down by hour of the day. So, let's see. And some of them vary some are very different than others. Like some people are mostly getting on and off like late at night or early in the morning, like at a bar or something, I guess. And others are probably more residential areas, so it's more like going home after work. And I did this part with D3, so it would dynamically update as you change what you're looking at. So this one's nighttime. So the top bar is 12 at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., all the way to 11 p.m. And you can hover over it and see how many people. And this is public on my website, so I'll just put a link on the Meetup website so you guys can check it out. So that's one thing I did. And then I got a little crazy and I did something more with the same data set. Here I wrote my own tile server in Go. And so this leaflet map is displaying two layers. One is the base layer of this dark theme map from CartoDB. And then the layer on top of that shows all the pickups that occurred, their actual position, and it's sort of like a heat map basically. But there's millions of points, and I'm basically showing every point. So again, this is about 77 million taxi stops. And some cool things are here in like Midtown, I guess it's called, and down here in the financial district, where the tall buildings are, it gets a little fuzzy from the GPS not being as accurate from the tall buildings. that right here. And I guess the tunnels kind of, you lose signal there. Again, the airports are big hotspots. Let's see. And the way I wrote it, I loaded the data into Cassandra and I keyed it by the tile, zoom, and XY. So when I'm rendering a tile, I can do it on the fly. And I can pull all the points that are in that one tile and render it. So it's actually rendering these tiles on the fly, but it caches them so that once it generates one tile, it doesn't have to do it again. Then I did something, I should have pulled it up earlier. Let's see. I wanted to animate that by time of day. Here it is. See if I can full screen it. And here I'm showing both pickups and drop-offs. So pickups are blue and drop-offs are red. And the colors blend together, and that's why it looks kind of green mostly. And this is stepping through, I think each frame is a 5-minute period. So for any one frame, all the dots are from that 5-minute period. And unfortunately, I didn't show like a clock or something. But this just cycles through a 24-hour period. It's a combination of all the days of the data. The most interesting part is like in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m., where everything kind of disappears mostly, and then kind of bubbles back up again. And you can see hot spots of where people are originating and terminating their ride. And of course, the airport.
What's red?
Red is drop-offs. So you see a lot of drop-offs at the airport at like 5 a.m. No one's leaving the airport at 5 a.m., but everyone's going to the airport at 5 a.m. So that's kind of cool. So once I had this framework put together for doing really high density maps, I wanted to try it with some work data. Here at Translope, we collect a lot of geospatial data from our users who use our application. And mostly we use that to build products that the transit agencies can use to see how people move around town or how people use their transit system. What stops they're getting on, what stops they're getting off, that kind of thing. But here I took all the data points that we had in our database for a 2-week period. And there's like a couple 100 million. And I plotted them on a map using the same code. This is Duke University. And you can see East and West Campus. You see the main link between them. You can even see footpaths of how people walk around campus. It's pretty scary.
So what are you measuring?
This is just like a heat map of all the data points that we collected. There's no processing on it as far as, this is just all the raw data points.
Cell phone?
Yeah, from thousands of people. One thing interesting is that Apple products, I'm not sure about Android, seem to snap to the road if it thinks you're driving, which I guess is kind of helpful, except it's not really giving you the actual GPS reading in that case. It's snapping it. So that's why most of the roads have an exact straight line on it. So, you can zoom anywhere here. And one of our biggest clients is University of Florida in Gainesville. I think I cleared my cache recently. Anyway.
Running out of cash without him.
That's pretty much it. Any questions? Josh? Stu? More maps?
The taxi cab data,
Yeah,
you were getting the Latin long when somebody got in the car and when they got out.
yes.
Okay. But no other point in between?
Right.
Okay.
Whereas the Translope map, it's wherever they're, well, whenever the whenever the phone decides to take up the point, which if it's running in the background, it's only going to be if you're moving a significant distance.
Right, yeah.
Because it's trying to conserve power. But if you're actually running our application, we get much more frequent updates.
Cool.
With that, could you track a single person? See where they went? I mean,
Can you show me?
So where do you live?
Well, actually, I've seen stories about celebrities who were tracked in New York City from the cab data.
Yeah. There's no privacy anymore. That's the bottom line of this stuff. I mean, the data's anonymous, but you can clearly see where someone lives from the long points, so it's not really anonymous anymore.
If the paparazzi tell you where the celebrity arrived at a particular time, yeah, there's a limited number of
Origins.
origins
Yeah.
for that data.
Yes. Well, that's my talk.
Cool.
Well, the only other person who signed up so far, well, we got 2 more, at least. I think some people need to wing a talk. But Josh, you want to come up?
I'm leaving the talk.
Well, let's wing it now.
Okay. To follow that though, I don't know.
No, don't.
Now I kinda wanna,
I should have gone last.
should've got last.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Do you need a lot?
everyone's an opener for you. Yeah, I do use power
Power
actually,
Power 2.
yeah. Cause apparently my charger at home doesn't wanna work anymore.
No stress.
I'm not stressed. Do I look stressed? Ah, look, computers. Okay, let's do choose your own adventure. I have 2 ideas. We'll do it by hands. I've been playing around with the Amazon Echo, and I found some project to do to control my Sonos with it, so I can show how that all works.
What's the Sonos?
Sonos is it's a network speaker that you can buy. What's really great about them is you can buy like 5 of them and network them together and play the same music. It handles the latency and all that. So
And Echo's the thing you talk to, right?
Echo's the thing I talk to. So right now at home, when I work at home now, so I sit down, I say, Alexa, turn the lights on. Alexa, play coding music in the office, and it all comes on. And it's like, and I just start working.
I'm gonna come to your house.
It actually has gotten me to the point where I'm like, what else can I control with this? so I can talk about that, or I rewrote my blog recently in a new blogging engine called Hugo, which is a Go-based thing, and I wrote a custom theme for it. So I could also show how that works too, 'cause it's a really good way to build a blog, and there's no WordPress and PHP involved. So let's show of hands, Alexa stuff. I think that's like everybody blog stuff.
I think you should do both.
Well, maybe later I'll do that.
Maybe
one.
later, yeah.
All right, I'll start with Alexa. So let's see. I'm winging this, so we're gonna see how this works. So I found this project called Echo Sonos. The first thing to remember is Echo is built intentionally, I think. I don't work at Amazon, so I'm making this up, to be poll only. So you can't ever have Alexa tell you something just randomly. Sometimes. Because sometimes she'll just come on and do things. I haven't figured that part out yet. But in general, the idea is you tell Alexa to do something, she doesn't tell you anything. And I guess there's probably some reason with like ads, like we don't want ads just to be blurted out at us throughout the day, so maybe there's a good reason. So I can't just say like set it up to like receive an event that I walked in the office, or I turn the light on to trigger something else. So you always has to be like very command oriented, and I'll get into how that works later. Sonos, on the other hand, has kind of an API, but not really. You can tell it to do things through their API, like play, pause, all the things you would want. They have their own music player, so ideally you connect like Spotify to your Sonos account and then play music from Spotify, or you connect Apple Music to your Spot or Sonos account and play your Apple Music music. And there's like 15 other data sources. So that's kind of the idea, is you connect your music to the speaker and then either play it on one speaker or all of your speakers. So I actually have two in my house. I have one that's just a small one in my office, and I have the sound bar under my TV. So in theory, I could play the same music throughout my house, or at least the first floor. All right, so to get this to work, we have to first, I'm going to do this in different pieces, and that's how I found this this project that someone else wrote, and I just hacked to my needs. The first bit is setting up some sort of API for to talk to Sonos. Sorry, all these little words that are all new, and the idea there being we just need a way to command, a request to tell Sonos to do something specific. Okay, so this is actually another open source project. It's open source, heck, open mic. So this one is called Node Sonos HTTP API, and literally all it does is it spins up. It's just a Node project that just spins up an API with some common things, like you can ask it for zones, and it'll tell you it goes out in the network and looks for every Sonos speaker can find. That kind of stuff. So you set that up on a system. I just happen to have a Mac Mini sitting there that runs some other stuff. So I set this up to run on there. So now what? You hit like an HTTP endpoint with the name of your playlist. Boom, the music plays. That's great. So that's step one. Step two, and I'm kind of brushing over this because this really has nothing to do with Amazon. This is just kind of the outside pieces. So step two is where it gets a little interesting. So now Amazon's released the Alexa Skills Kit. And what that is it's their kind of SDK, not really an SDK, it's more of like a configuration thing where you can configure different, what they call skills. So Amazon doesn't call them apps, they call them skills. So let me make this bigger. So I'll go ahead and go into the Alexa Skills Kit. Oh, of course my session is expired. That's like the worst thing about Amazon is they are really aggressive on getting you kicked out. Alright. Apps and services. New Alexa Skills Kit. So in here you can actually create a new skill, and let's just go ahead and look at what a skill looks like. You get like a name, and you get this invocation name. So remember this, it's called Sonos, because the way it works, it's all command based, remember? So what I have to say is, Alexa, ask Sonos. That's what this command is. You have to say what you're going to invoke it with. Okay? So that's where you tell it what name you want to use. This name is just kind of a blah, whatever. Can everybody see that? Okay. The next thing is the interaction model. And this is where you get into like telling it how to parse what you're saying. You can't just say anything, unfortunately. It does do some like random, it'll kind of figure out what you mean. So like, if I say, Alexa, turn the lights off, please, it'll turn the lights off. If I say, Alexa, please turn the office lights off, it figures it out. It has good processing, but for the most part, you have to kind of describe what you want. So they have 3 sections here, and this is going to be in the context of what I'm doing for music player, so you'll kind of see some common ideas. You defined a schema, which defines the types of things that you're going to tell Alexa, or you're going to tell Alexa in your speech. So the first one, and these are called intents. So if you know any Android stuff, this is going to be confusing. But good if you don't. So I'm going to create this intent called the playlist intent, and it's going to care about this thing called a preset, and it's going to care about this thing called a rooms. You can think of these like category or like types, right? We're defining our own types, right? So later I'm going to create values, common values that could go into those. Okay. So presets is actually what this guy used, who wrote this, used the term presets for like the name of the playlist you want to play. So if your playlist is called coding music is what would get passed into that field later. Room is obviously room, right? Because you can have your Sonos in multiple rooms. And Sonos, the way it works is it's set up by the room. So when you set up, you say, this is in my living room. This is in my office. So you go through and you define all these different intents. The favorite intent, so I can say play my favorites. The pause intent, so I can say pause this room, right? Common music stuff. Pause all. This is the one I remember. So if anybody's ever watching the TV, I don't know what will happen because that might be a bug. Huh. I should have set up. Resume. Basically, this is just like, it's the description of the different functions, if you will. You could think of them as functions, right? These are intents, and these are the variables that come into those intents. Then what you do is you create, they call them custom slot types, which is like the worst name ever. I despise it. But you give it some help, right? You give it some words that are common ones that you would probably use. So for example, presets, I have rock, rap, pop, hits, all those types of things, right? That doesn't mean I have to always say those. It's just trying to help it out to give it some sample words that you would send it. Same thing with rooms, living room, dining room, family room, office. Those go through there. And then there's toggles, so I can say, some of the intents up here, I have it set up so I can say repeat intent, which is just a toggle thing. So, because repeat, right, if you think about it, is on or off. That's only two states of a repeating a track. So that one, on or off, is all you're going to say. And then finally, you describe, this is where it gets hairy, this is where it gets really ugly, so brace yourself. Finally, you describe all the different patterns that you might say, right? So for the playlist intent, I want to say everything, remember, after the ask Sonos, because Sonos, that bit's defined in that previous step. So here, I would say, Alexa, ask Sonos to play coding music in Office. Play coding music in the Office. Playlist coding music in Office, etc., right? So you can see that they're all broken down. I added a couple because, like, for this pause intent, good night, Office. Shut off the Office, turn the volume up and down. One that's really fun is the what's playing intent. So you can ask it what's playing and it'll tell you what's playing. So now you set up a skill, as Amazon calls it. But how does it actually process it? Where is it actually doing this work to decide what to do in each of these cases? Because remember, on the one side we had an API that says, I know how to talk to Sonos. On the other side, we've described a skill that Alexa knows how to parse and call specific functions, right? There has to be something in the middle to actually route playlist intent to this particular API endpoint, right? So the way that works is actually through AWS Lambda. Who's familiar with Lambda? Serverless computing. Or I like to say, I don't want to care about servers computing, because really they're the server, of course. So the way that works is, let me open up another tab, console. If you're not familiar with Lambda, what it is it's a way to define a function, and you can put it up on Amazon's cloud and trigger it from many different methods. So for example, you can trigger it with an S3 update. So I'm working on actually a map server for my day job perks, that I drop a file in S3, it fires off this Lambda function that parses it into tiles and spits those out into another bucket. So it's kind of an event-driven model. So here I have a function under Lambda, ignore this screen of BS, called Alexa Sonos, and it has a event source, which is coming from Alexa. So its source to trigger this function is Alexa saying, I figured some request has been made, and the request is playlist coding in Office, right? That's the packet it sends to me. Oh great, yeah, I gotta run this somewhere else. Echo Sonos. So the way this works is it's just a Node.js app, and this, I don't want to go too deep in here, but it basically just defines a function for each of these intents. So the playlist intent, that gets called, Alexa passes that over. AWS picks it up, says, okay, this is the function I'm going to call, which then, of course, calls that API, and the whole thing comes together. So it's kind of 3 stages, and it brings it all together. If I would have thought ahead, I would have brought everything and showed you it. But luckily, I'm enough of a nerd that I took a video of it last night. So, Alexa, ask Sonos to play the playlist Coding Music in the Office. You can hear it said, I started, it's queued and started, and now it's playing. So, that's it.
Awesome. So is it playing like a predefined playlist that you put together?
Yep. So Sonos has its own app, which is a horrendous app, which is really the reason I did this, because I just don't want to use it. I originally had AirPlay set up on that server that I actually run this API on. I had an AirPlay node script that would pass it off to Sonos through the same interface, but it would take inputs from AirPlay, so I could just AirPlay to it. But it was like always on a 5-second delay, and we get stopped. So there's all this weird stuff. So I can actually show you. It's really the worst app. It's really the worst app ever. It looks like it was written in 2005. It won't show you anything because there's no Sonos on this network, but you can see with those, whatever these are, that it's really great. Anyway, yeah, so you define your own playlist, and the cool thing is the way this app works is you can connect sources to Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, I think, all the typical ones, and then you can add those you can create playlists over there and just wholesale put it into a Sonos playlist.
Cool.
I found that you have to be very specific. I actually renamed that playlist from Coding Music to Coding, because anytime the longer the name gets, the more difficult it has figuring out what you meant. so that helps. But anyway, that is all for this one. Any other questions?
So for the Alexa apps, or they weren't called apps, but
Skills.
the skills, is there like a marketplace for those at this point? Or like, how would you share that with somebody else?
Yeah, so there is a marketplace, and they're really. So if I'd finished that, if you looked at that, there's a couple more checkboxes here that I just stopped because I only need this to run for myself, obviously. But you can go through, and yes, there's a whole. I can actually show you mine. I could actually hit that endpoint right now, and my cats would get freaked out because music starts playing. But every time you ask Alexa something, it gives you this feed. So, like before I left, I asked what the temperature was tonight, so I can know if I had a chicken jacket, and it reads to me whatever. Apparently, I forgot because I asked it like 3 times in a row. My wife and I had this joke. She's got into it too, so she's trying to learn Node.js, and she's using. This has been kind of inspiring to her to learn, and to learn coding in general, because she's not naturally a coder. Or not naturally, nobody's naturally a coder, whatever. She's not a coder by trade, but she's wanted to. So she found, apparently Alexa has a hard time with Bjork. So I asked it to play Bjork. And if you just ask it to play music, it uses Amazon Prime. So you have Amazon Prime Music too, so it'll search that. So you can see it found sample of Bjork. And then I got clever and I tried to say, play Bjork. Just thinking that it didn't know how to handle it, and said play Boy George. So,
I wonder if you pronounce it in like Icelandic. You could use the Icelandic pronunciation.
Yeah, maybe I need to do that.
Which is something like beer.
Beer, yeah. It does traffic, so when I leave to take my daughter to school in the morning, I'm like, tell me the traffic, and tells that. So you can see all that. Skills though are in the skills one, and they're all horrible. Like. It's really early, I think. It's just early days. There's a couple good ones like Automatic, which is that little plug that you put in your car. I say Alexa, ask Automatic how much gas I have, and it'll say your Kia Optima has 42% gas or whatever.
Awesome.
So there's a couple good ones. There's a Capital One, and you can ask how much money you have.
How rich am I?
How rich?
I should buy a boat.
But there's a bunch. So as you can imagine, this happened in the Apple Store early. All the apps ended up being variations of the tutorial. So the tutorial that Amazon puts out is a quiz. So there's like 500 quizzes of just different varying things. Ask superheroes who Spider-Man is. So it's early days, but it's really
Ask the
cool.
pianist for an A.
What's that?
Ask the pianist for an A.
Yeah.
That's cool.
There's some cool ones, but it's nice. This is basically the app. It's just a web app. So when you install this on your phone to set it up, it's just this page. Oh, look, it actually looks good. On my screen, on Retina, it looks horrible. Anyway, yeah, now playing music. You can tell it to play off your Audible. It's obviously connected to Amazon's ecosystem. They give you things to try. Apparently you can buy things on it, but I haven't been brave enough to do that.
How do you configure Alexa that skills to connect to Lambda?
So because it's all in the part of the same ecosystem, they actually have there's a type, there's an event type. So on this configuration tab, skills and information tab. Oh wait, sorry. It goes the other way. You set up this event source in Lambda, and the type of that source is Alexa skill.
Nice.
So it knows that it's getting stuff from there. And then you take the ARN, which is the Amazon resource name, and there's somewhere where you put it in here. Publishing. No. I don't remember. Somewhere in here you tell it the name of the. Here you go. Actually, right here, we could do it. Play coding in the office. And it works. So my music is playing at home right now, and no one's there to hear it. So is it really playing is the question.
A tree falls in the woods.
Yeah. Somewhere you actually reference the ARN. I
Okay.
just don't remember where it is.
So you could essentially not skip Lambda and use something else.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Hopefully I paused it. Anyway.
If that's the term, if he didn't.
Yeah. I can just imagine my dog's really anxious, so she's probably like, all right, cool. Thank you. And I might be back.
Awesome. Dave or David?
Dave?
There's two of
For
you.
Dave? Oh, there's another. There's actually David as well.
You wanna take a talk?
Yeah, I'll take a whirl at it.
Sweet.
I'm also winging it.
We're all winging it today.
Whoops. So my idea was talking about a build tool.
Do you want one?
Sure. I think I'm good, but it wouldn't hurt to have it. It's a build tool for Clojure, the language, that a couple of my coworkers at AdZerk built. And it's really awesome. I've been using it since I found out about it. It's sort of like, so Clojure is a fairly new language. I think it came about maybe about 10 years ago, mid-2000s. How many of you guys are fairly familiar with Clojure? So just a couple of you. Still not really widely adopted. So at some point in the mid to late 2000s, someone made a build tool for it. And that was sort of like the de facto build tool. It's called Leiningen, which is...
So just for the people who aren't familiar with Clojure, you want to give a 3-sentence explanation, detailed?
That's probably a good idea. So I think like the major bullet points of Clojure are, it's a JVM-based language. It runs on the Java virtual machine. It's a Lisp. And yeah, it's a Lisp that runs on the JVM. And it's optimized for functional programming. I think it's great. It's a really good general purpose programming language. It's really good for like concurrent programming. It has a lot of built-in concurrent structures. We use it a lot at AdZerk. So there's, at some point early on in the life of Clojure, someone made this thing called Lineagain, which is a build tool for building Clojure projects. Before that, it was pretty messy. Basically, Clojure, the runtime for Clojure is just a Java jar file. So you can use it in Java projects. You can use Clojure in Clojure projects as well. So you basically had to deal with Java build tools, which, as you may or may not know, are kind of terrible. It's just really difficult to deal with those things. So people want to improve on that. And so they built this thing called Lineagain. Basically, the idea is you have this file in your project called project.clj. And this is basically Clojure code, but it's more of a configuration map. You're defining a project, you give it a name and a version number. There's a bunch of different keys like the description. This is a vector of dependencies. Each one of those is a combination. It's like sort of a tuple of the symbol identifying the dependency and the version that you want. You can define the main function to run. And then you can do things like from the command line run, and it'll run that main function. So this was like kind of the way to go for a long time. It probably still is. I think boot is still not as well adopted as Lineagain is. But within the last maybe 2 to 3 years, my coworkers at AdZerk built this thing called boot. This is the website for it, bootclj.com. And the thing that they like to say a lot about boot is that it's not a build tool, it's a build, sort of like a build framework, which is a little bit BS kind of, but it's, it's basically, the whole philosophy of boot is that you don't want this configuration map. Because this is pretty easy to understand. It's very simple, this is a simple project. But when you start looking at things like Clojure script projects, Clojure script is a spin-off of Clojure that instead of compiling to Java, it compiles to JavaScript. And you can do all kinds of extremely complicated things with Clojure script. So sooner or later, you end up with this configuration map that's like lines and lines long, and it's really hard to have more fine-grained control over your build tasks and how to build your project. So basically, they deconstructed that whole thing, and they made it so that the build is really a program. So what that means is that you can define your build tasks. It's sort of similar to if you've ever worked with Grunt or Rake, things like that. You can basically define your build tasks using the language that you're working with. So I'll show you a bit of that in a second. I don't have slides, I'm just kind of doing this on the fly, but I figured I would open up a terminal and just kind of show you how to do some stuff with boot. So one thing that boot can do right off the bat, well, first I'll show you that there's if you do boot -- help after you install it, it'll show you this list of built-in boot tasks. And these are all defined in Clojure. You can define your own tasks in Clojure as well. But each of these tasks has its own options, and there's a variety of really useful things. Like you can open up a REPL to get sort of an interactive feedback loop when you're developing, really common task. You can install the project into your local Maven repository. So if you're trying to experiment with like a library you're building in another project that you're building, you can temporarily install a different experimental version using this install task. You can build an Uber jar using a combination of the Uber and jar tasks. You can compile Java source, which I can actually show you. So you can actually use boot to build Java projects as well, which is kind of a cool side effect. So the cool thing about boot is that you can use it in a few different ways. You can use it in a REPL. So if you're building a program interactively and you want to try building it a certain way without modifying your current build, you could do it on the fly in a REPL. You can do it on the command line, which I'll show you in a second. And you can also you can make this file called build.boot, where you basically define the program, or you sort of write the code that is your task that you're building. So we'll get to this in a second. But first, let's say we have like a simple Java file. We're just going to call it hello world. We have a main function that just prints hello world. So with boot, you can, so off the bat, if you just do boot and Java C, this is the task that you'd use to build that source into a class file. So you get hello world.class. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to append target at the end. What this task does is it writes your changes to the file set onto your into this directory, which by default is called target. So if I do this, actually nothing's going to happen. It's going to say it's compiling a source file. Oh, actually, yeah, I should have planned this better. It actually did do the thing. That's because I have a build.boot. So I'm going to temporarily move that somewhere else. All right. I'm going to remove this target directory. So now, all I have is my my hello world.java file. So if I do java c target, it says it's writing the target dir, and now I have a target directory, but there's nothing in it. So the reason for that is that boot doesn't know about where my sources are. So this is all configurable. The way that we do that is we use this -s, and we say source, and then we can say java c and write that to target. So now we have class file. So basically you can start adding different steps into your build process. The next thing you'd want to do is write a jar file so you can run this program. So the way you do that, you need to write a POM file first, and this takes a few arguments. It takes sort of the name of your project and a version, and what it's going to do is it's going to generate a pom.xml file. Usually you have to like write the XML yourself, and it's kind of a pain in the ass, but boot will actually generate this for you on the fly. So if you do that, it'll include the POM file, and then we also want to write a jar file. And the only required argument for that is -m, which is the main function, or main class. So we can say that's hello world. And then I think that'll do the trick. So we can say write that to the target directory. So now if you look in your file set, we have this meta-inf directory. This is all just kind of stuff that's going to be stuffed into the jar file. And this is all sort of temporary working files. And it's created a POM XML, which we can look at. Oh, target. So, you know, this is something that we would have had to do this manually, but boot took care of it for us. And we also have the jar file, which we can run using Java jar, and ran our program. So this is pretty cool, and it does a similar thing for Clojure as well. I can show you an example of that. First, I'd like to show you that build.boot file that I moved away temporarily. So this is when I mentioned earlier that the whole philosophy behind boot is that instead of having this configuration map, you're basically just writing a program that defines your build tasks. This is what I'm talking about. This is sort of like the main file at the root of your project if you're using boot to build it. So the first thing we do is we set our source directories using setenv, which is a built-in boot function. And we're setting source paths to this set of strings, and we're saying that source is our only source path. If we wanted to, we could add other things, like some other source path. You can just write any Clojure code you want here. You can define constants, whatever you'd like. So you're free to write your build file any way you'd like to. And then this def task macro is basically just a way to define build tasks. It takes arguments, and right here we're saying we have no arguments. But if we wanted to, we could use this to parameterize our build, and we can do things like boot build dash, whatever. So you can have different types of builds. So we're making it so that when you run boot build in your terminal, it'll actually execute this pipeline. So, I know you guys don't really know Clojure, but so what this is doing here, this comp function is just built in from Clojure, and it's composing a bunch of different functions together. So we're creating a pipeline. So we're creating, we're using these tasks, Java C, and POM, and jar, and target, to do exactly what we just did on the command line, this line here. So basically this build file encapsulates this whole long command that we just ran. So now in the future, all we have to do is just run boot build, and it does exactly the same thing that we just did. So that's kind of just what boot does. It gets a lot more complicated than that, but I thought might be interested to see kind of the basics of how that works. I think that might be about 5 minutes. What do you guys think? Any questions?
I like your battery indicator there on your terminal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says if I unplug it, it'll turn red. So another cool thing about boot I wanted to show is the REPL. If you're interested in Clojure, this would be like the best way, I think, to explore it. You can set up boot. It's like a really simple install process. It's cross-platform, and you just run boot REPL. And depending on what directory you're in, it'll automatically load your sources from your project. But you can also just run it in any directory, and you have just a working interactive feedback loop for working with Clojure. And then you can evaluate forms. It works like any other interactive, evaluator like Ruby's IRB or whatever. So, yeah.
So Clojure doesn't come with a REPL?
No, when they created Clojure to begin with, it was like a very simple thing. It's basically like a Java library that was a language as well. And then over time, people have built onto that. Yep. All right, that's all I got.
Is that, what's POM? P-O-M?
Oh, that's so if you ever write a Java project, you need a pom.xml in order to package it as a library or as a project. So in order to generate that jar file, you need to write all that XML.
I don't miss Java. It's been about 8 years.
Luckily, we don't need to write Java anymore because we have Scala and Clojure and all these other things.
Awesome. Thanks for talking.
Yep.
Should I go?
Yes.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh,
Charge up too.
the other side. Wine. Some red here. That's about, yeah.
Maybe bigger.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
All right. And this will need to get bigger too. So, I was trying to think of something cool to show off. There's a project I found a little while ago called Dockercraft, and it kind of tickled me. It's not that useful, but I think it's really interesting. So, so what it is Docker container management, or like Docker process management done through Minecraft. So Docker, if you're unfamiliar, it's a way of just running containers like on a server. You kind of have these encapsulated environments to work in, and there's a command line tool for it, of course. Let's see if this works. Whoa, zoomed in too much. This is a server I'm running. It has a bunch of Docker containers running. A lot of them are through a service called Doku. That's like a do-it-yourself Heroku. If you guys have used that, it's for hosting your own Docker containers. It's cool. It's unrelated to what we're doing. But a bunch of Docker containers running. And what you can do is somebody made it's a Docker container also that you can start up. It's this Dockercraft project. And when I fire that up, let's see. It's got all this server stuff that pops up. What it lets me do is fire up my Minecraft client and connect to my Docker instance in Minecraft. There we go. Smooth that a little. And what we're seeing now is a little world generated where each of these boxes is a Docker container running on the server. So this is the list of containers we just were looking at.
Blue is active?
Blue is active, orange is inactive, it's shut off. So you get some CPU usage information, some memory usage. I got the name. So this is the container, this is the Dockercraft container right here that we're looking at. which is kind of weird or recursive or something.
Is that a torch inside?
It is. Yeah, you gotta light it up in here so you can see. Makes sense. We have, oh, this is a fun one. This is my homepage. I tried this earlier, like we can try it again. It doesn't really matter. Here's my website, it loads. If I jump in here, we're able to see a start-stop lever and a remove lever, so I can stop this. And if we go to my website, let me go into new tabs to make sure it retries in earnest. I shut it off, so it's not gonna load. And in fact,
So how are you here?
well, yeah, it's very confusing. So, actually, let me turn this back on too. I found out earlier, because of the way I'm running this particular container, I can't just flip it back on, which is bad. So I can run this command, and my website will come up eventually. We'll just not worry about that. But we can see all these other ones. Here are some containers that aren't running. These are just like garbage throwaway ones. I can hit remove, destroy them when I'm done with them. And I've actually found this is a good way to clean stuff up. That's the only real useful thing I've done with this, but it's easy to inspect. Like, that's what I like about it. It's really easy to kind of get a feel for what's going on as far as your Docker setup. They have plans. I don't know how active this project is. They have plans to try to represent mounted volumes and things as well. I could see it being really useful in a way, but it's mostly kind of ridiculous.
What happens at night? Do creepers come and like?
I'm pretty sure it's in
you have to hide
creative
in one
mode.
of-
No, but that would be interesting. I wonder if you could
It's a
represent.
DDoS.
Yeah, exactly. Represent different attacks that way. The other thing you can do is run some commands from Minecraft. Oop. My C is not working.
Minecraft.
Let's see if, oh, here we go. I have a history. So I can run a Redis container, and it should, unless something screwy is happening, it should fire one up. So you're able to like spin up containers in here also. I don't see that happening.
The
but
ones
Is it on the
spaces
left?
that you
Yeah.
killed.
it may have. I don't know if it's that smart.
It's like
Did-
you did
Yeah,
too,
it
right?
looks like it did. Yeah. Is this it? No, it's not it. Maybe it's this. Yeah, there's my Redis. Yep. But then we can go. It's smart enough to know too. You can't remove it unless it's shut off. So gotta shut it down. Oops. Having some delay. I'm not sure why. The VPS I'm running this on is pretty bare bones, so we could be experiencing some slowness from that. Yeah, that's it. I just thought it was hilarious. I would love to have something with more features to actually like work with Docker on, but
Your whole file system or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It
cool. It's
reminds
kind of
me
like
Jurassic Park.
exactly.
I
I
know,
know,
me too.
this, right? I can fly through it.
I know this.
Yeah.
I know you do.
The last thing I'll attempt is shutting off the container for the server. At some point, it should kick me out because I shut it off. But that's about it.
Can you actually mine pieces of the Docker and then make like an axe out of it?
Not yet.
That
I'm
would
sure
be
it's on the
excellent.
to-do list. Yeah, there we go.
Time tools.
Man,
So-
I could totally convince my son to get a job now.
I was just gonna say, good thing we didn't bring Xander tonight. He'd take down production and everything else.
It's a language they can speak.
Was that
Yeah.
was that a square sun I saw?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a Minecraft thing. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I
Cool.
start. Hopefully my website's back. Yep. Good.
Any questions? That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I can do these.
We're all winging it today, so.
I'm winging it. I mean, I'm winging it. I'm a baby, so I can go.
Oh, Mark's still wanting to go too.
Yeah, you can.
Oh,
Let's,
Well, Mark, go first.
That's quick. Just real quick.
Real.
Okay, I think next Thursday, the 24th?
Sure.
21st.
21st.
Yeah, today's 14th.
The, there's a SIG of the Triangle.net user group called the Polyglot user group or meetup group. And they're having a movie night. So instead of tackling some data problem, they're going to have a movie night. And Microsoft recently had their build conference, and they're going to show 2 sessions from the build conference, one on R, open source, and one on Python, open source. And I checked last night, and Jamie said that they have plenty of room. They serve good food, like here, and you're all welcome. So Trinug, Trinug, is a meetup group, .NET user group, and look for Polyglot. In fact, if you're just going to do a general meetup, fine, do Polyglot, and you should be able to see it. So it's movie night, with the movies being in parentheses, or quoted. Yes?
Tuesday, April 26th.
26th.
Polyglot.net build movie.
26th. So 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Cool.
And I think I'm at my time.
Good job.
Yay.
So, even on a whiteboard up here,
You can move this.
we can with that, we've got good markers. Will that thing erase? It looks like it doesn't erase.
It'll erase.
I have my tablet.
Do it live.
Rudely, but I'm doing live. I'm out of beer also,
No,
so
go get more.
we'll do that. And then, drink responsibly. Who put this sign here? I guess if you're a transportation company.
We got plenty in.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I always like grossly just race with my hands when I
Yeah, you're
t-
weird like
talk, and then that's how boards get like this. Okay, that's cool. All right.
Hold on.
Oh.
It might not be in the camera.
Oh,
Oh, it's stuff I know.
it's not. Yeah. If you could get it in the camera and like not me, or if you could shoot me from above, with that Snapchat angle. Okay, so who's familiar with what CAD software is? Right? It's like if you're doing engineering, if you're doing mechanical CAD, that's like DXFs and vector drawings. If sometimes it's solid models, sometimes it's mesh models. If you're doing electrical CAD, sometimes it's schematic capture, sometimes it's like printed circuit board layout stuff, sometimes it's bitmap. But it's basically a way of getting designs into a machine. Who's familiar with CAM software? Yeah, all right, cool. So CAM software is computer aided machining or manufacturing. And I want to talk about it for a couple minutes because there really isn't any good open source of this. It's like this really scattered field, and it's awful. And people have got up here today and talked about some really good open source solutions to problems that they have. I have a problem and no solutions, so y'all are smart. I'm gonna just talk about this problem a little bit. So I'm gonna narrow it down to one really specific thing. I came here a couple of months ago and talked about the HandyBot, which is a little 3-axis CNC that's like portable, little blue and yellow gizmo that's for basically machining materials. So you start with a block of something. This is subtractive machining. You start with a block of something that is oblong and weird and not drawn properly, and you cut away material to make the pieces that you want. And you typically do that with a circular revolving cutter. So you come at it from the top with like a kind of a drill bit sort of thing or a router bit sort of thing. And it goes and it dips into the material and it machines things. Is everybody following me so far? Okay, cool. So if I was making this part, in my CAD software, I would probably draw the square to cut out the outline here, and then I might like draw another square from the corner. And then, or if it was a solid modeling program, I might do this and actually capture this depth and I would have a model of the thing, but having the model of the thing doesn't mean that the thing is made. What you have to do is then take this and run it through CAM software, which basically decides what the tool path of this thing is going to be. And it's going to say, okay, well, I'm going to come here, and I'm going to surface the top, and I'm going to come around the outside, and I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to come dip in here and cut this piece out of here in the middle. And so there's a lot of like thinking and abstraction that goes into how that process is done. And there are a lot of professional tools for doing this that like cost money and are not open, and they do it really well. But when you get in the open source field, it's like very scattered. There's like a lot of different packages, and like some of them are like console tools, and they're like libraries. It's like, oh, we take a DXF and convert it to this one special subset of DXF, and then you do this one thing and you give it these parameters, and then you get a file out that you could then maybe turn into something that you could actually make. It's a real mess. And so trust me when I say that those tools are awful and they're not really up to par. And what I want to talk about is like why that's a hard problem, and what, you know, just some of the like interesting difficulties of thinking about this kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk about it with whatever time I have. All right, how much time do I have? Who knows?
We didn't run the timer today. 'cause
Okay.
it's-
So I'm going to talk about, one is I'm going to talk about cutter offsets. And I'm going to start with a real simple thing that I want to cut out. I got a material, and I want to cut out a square. I got a big sheet of material. Let's say it's a 1/2 inch thick, and I want to cut out a square. And let's say this is actual size. Let's say it's this big, and let's say I'm using a cutter that's about this big around. So if this is my DXF, this is what like the designer came out of CAD programming and said, well, I want this, and it's, you know, it's 2 inches on this side, and it's 2 inches on this side. And I want to cut this out. If I got a cutter that's a 1/2 inch in diameter, or let's say it's an 1/8 inch in diameter. Well, if I cut right on the line, I'm going to get with a piece that's too small, right? If I like do this red sucks. Start here. Go around like this. What I'm going to end up with is a square that's like a 1/4 inch smaller than I wanted, because this is a non-zero thickness. So what you have to do, one of the steps you have to do in CAM, is you have to do cutter offset compensation. So you take this outside geometry and you generate,
Maybe an 1/8 inch. Too small.
would be a quarter.
Six.
Yeah, it would be an 1/8 inch too small. No, you're right.
So it's a 16th because you're measuring from the center?
It's, well, if I've got an 1/8 inch cutter and I go all the way around line to line, I'm losing a 16th on this side and a 16th on this side. So I'm losing an 1/8 here, and I'm losing an 1/8 here. So this ends up being smaller. So what I have to do is take this and do an offset. I have to put this path on the outside. So that seems simple enough, right? It's a square. I mean, obviously I've chosen a really simple example here. But one of the problems with this is, what do you do about the corners? So what I've drawn here is basically just a bigger square. And it seems like a really simple, green cut sucks too. This seems like a really simple thing to do. You just do this offset. But the problem is, if this is an actual spinning cutter, I'm actually moving along the outside of the material. What happens is, if I move here, I get here, I've got to come to rest in this axis, and my cutter basically stops and then continues here. And it stops and continues here. It stops and continues here. I've cut out the square, but I could have done better if I went around these corners. I rounded these corners. Basically starting the cutter here, ending the cutter here, and going around rather than actually departing from the material and taking the corner means that I accelerate in this axis at the same time that I'm decelerating in this axis. So the tool moves more continuously. The chip load is more continuous, which means basically like I never stop the cutter, so the edge quality of what I'm cutting out doesn't change as I, like slow down into this curve, and the cut quality improves. So all professional CAM tools do this, but boy, it's a pain in the ass, especially if it's not just a simple square. If I've got like all kinds of different geometry and different angles and stuff, I've got to generate basically these arc segments at every corner to make sure that I'm keeping a constant chip load. So that's one thing, is cutter offset compensation and constant chip load. Another part.
What do you define as, what is chip?
Oh, chip load, excuse me. So there's a speed that I'm moving the tool, and then there's the speed that the tool is spinning. And basically the product of those two things is the chip load, and you want to keep that constant. So if you have to slow down your cutter, you want to speed up the rotation so that the actual blade, if this is like a spiral, like drill bit type thing, the actual tangential speed of the blade is always the same going into the material. If you don't have control over the tangential speed of the blade, which is what is usually the case in machining, what you want to do is just reduce the amount of stopping and starting, accelerating and decelerating that you do.
And this is basically a computer-controlled rotozip.
Yeah, computer control rotozip, like a CNC mill or router. So another problem is if I have like a weirder geometry, let's say something like this. Now this is a piece that I want to cut out of the page. Well, this is pretty straightforward. I start with my cutter here. I go here. I do my round corner the way I should. I get here, and then I get in here. I actually can't take this corner. I actually can't get all the way in there because I've got a radius cutter, and so the piece that I'm actually going to get is going to be shaped like this. And when I generate this offsets, I have to actually account for the fact that I don't want to like plow into there. There are instances where you do want to plow into that corner and hollow it out because you need this material to be gone, even though it costs you having some material gone here. But sometimes you don't, so you have to keep track of that, and you have to generate this geometry appropriately to account for that radius. So that's yet another problem in CAD/CAM sort of situations where calculating the offsets and stuff is not as simple as it might seem at first. A third thing, what do you call that? That still falls under just offset compensation. You just gotta make sure. Now, when there are names for when you actually want to like hollow out that corner. That one of them is called dog boning, which is now really funny that I say it out loud. But because if you're doing it on a square and you're wanting to cut out a square hole, and you go into the corners to make sure that you've cut them all out, you end up with this thing that kind of the final shape of the thing looks kind of like a dog bone. If you have a really good imagination. So, one of the other problems is if I have a big sheet of material and I'm cutting out a smaller piece of material, let's say I have a sheet that's like this, and I cut out a piece like this, which means I'm going to have a path like this. As I finish my cut, this piece, unless this is screwed down, or this is screwed down, or it's held down with a vacuum chuck, or it's glued down, or there's some kind of thing to fix it in place, this is not held down. When I finish cutting out, it's free to like break loose and rattle around. So what a lot of people do when they're cutting materials out of sheets is they'll cut tabs. And they'll basically, if you're coming along with your cutter like this, you'll come up and down at certain points to leave basically a little piece of material, so that when you take out, it's like those injection molded like model airplane pieces where you get like a whole big like array of all these parts, and they're all held together with like these little tiny tabs. You have to like break the tabs and cut them with an X-Acto knife and file them off. It's the same kind of thing. You want to make sure that material stays in place, because if it breaks loose and then like rattles around, it'll snap your cutter or get marred up in your machine. So that's yet another thing, is tabbing. Now, if I don't want to do a profile cut and I want to actually just cut out a hole, I can pocket it. So I can start here, and I'm going to take a cutter and just raster the whole thing out and remove it entirely. But there's a whole bunch of different ways to raster, right? So if I'm starting here, I can do this, and just kind of go back and forth. Side effect of that is
mowing the lawn.
What's that? It's like mowing the lawn. But I leave an artifact every place that I change directions. So if I want to do that properly, I actually like go here, and then like dip back up, go here, dip back up, go here, dip back up. That's yet again a lot of stopping and starting and moving in and out. You can spirally raster, but that comes with its own liabilities, and you have to make sure that when you hit this corner, you like come in here, because since it's a radius cutter, you're going to be left with these little marks there, so you have to be like really careful about that. The reason that this stuff doesn't exist in the open source world is because it's a lot of bookkeeping. It's like not computationally all that difficult, but it's like, man, what a pain in the butt to like actually make sure like that tabbing thing, like you think you've got your offset compensation done and you think you've got a way to do the geometry and everything, and then you realize like, oh, I'm a user and I want to go stick 3 tabs in here. You're like, oh man, I don't want to code, that's awful. Another one is carving. So like if I have let's say some text, this really terrible font I just made up, and I want to cut it with a cutter that's not shaped like this being top down, this being side, but something that looks like this, how can I go and get basically a chiseled effect by carving this out? That's done with a couple of different mathematical techniques, one of which is called the medial axis transform, which basically this is really hard to draw in 2D, but you basically start in the corners where you're right at the surface, and then as you move towards the middle of the part, you go deeper and deeper into the material, so that like here, I'm this deep into the material to where I'm cutting with this part of the cutter. And when I'm up here in the corners, like as I get up to this corner, I'm like pulling the cutter out, so like when I'm cutting the corners, I'm just cutting with the tip. And so you get this kind of chiseled look. But you have to like take this geometry and generate that geometry from it and account for all the usual like machining stuff and constant chip load and all that stuff, which is yet another problem with this kind of software. So, open source problem. If y'all want to write that, just go ahead. So the company that I've been working with, ShopBot Tools, that makes the HandyBot that I brought in a couple months ago, we're doing an all open source stack for this kind of stuff. It's called the FabMo project if you look it up online. But there's, we are writing the software that runs the tools right now, and that's kind of getting off the ground. We're starting to sell the HandyBots. But the next kind of step for us is kind of moving into this CAM software and trying to figure out how I can go from something that you've designed to something that is, can actually be machined. And it turns out to be kind of tricky. And the open source community, I think, just in general would benefit a great deal from having general purpose CAM software that you could use for any platform, not just the Fabmo thing, but like, if I have a DXF and I have a CNC mill, there really isn't that thing in the middle that lets me go from my design to the machining. And I think it's kind of sad because we're open source people and we want there to be open free stuff for people to use to do all kinds of stuff, especially making stuff, because that seems like really important. So, questions?
Did a little Googling and found things like free mill, PyCam.
Try them out.
Got a spare hand?
Yeah, I've looked at both of them. They're not great. And I'm not meaning to slight the authors of FreeMill or PyCam. Most of the packages that I found out there are either not. FreeMill is last I checked was okay. Not. I forget which one was which, but either not tremendously well maintained, not very up to date, or just didn't fit the bill, or were kind of not suited for these types of problems, or some of these types of problems. Anything else?
Sure. Good stuff. Who else wants to talk?
Yeah, nothing.
Cool.
Chuck.
All right. Come on up. All right. Andrew, right?
Yes. Okay, when I last spoke to you, a company I was working for, and I'll give you a little review of the company. We do automotive analytics specifically for maintenance shops. So we're pulling in a lot of data from what they call dealer management systems. And they come in about, I don't know, they're probably like 40 different formats. And well, 15, and they all have their own individual problems and quirks. So we were looking at using Pentaho, and we also looked at using IBM's DataStage. My boss really liked DataStage because they had it had a metadata system that could follow you through the ETL process, and he really liked that. And actually, IBM came in at actually the least expensive ETL tool that we had looked at, amazingly enough. However, my boss took it to the big guy, and the big guy said, nah, let's go with Pentaho. So we're working with Pentaho. Now another side of this story is the fact that I went out and I decided I'll try a premium edition of LinkedIn, and I did a survey. And these surveys don't work quite that well. I sent out about 8 emails basically asking, hey, what's your experience with Pentaho community? And are there any problems? Would you recommend using the free version as opposed to buying it? I got 3 responses. 2 of them were from people who had been working with ETLs for probably like 10 years. And each of them, that's 20 years of experience. And then I got, I don't know, have you ever heard of Mammoth Data? Andrew Oliver's company over in Durham. They used to be open source integrators. Anyway, first of all, I got two emails back, and they said, sure, no problem. The only reason you really want to, in fact, they even said, I don't know why you'd want to go with the
Community edition.
Not the community edition, but the enterprise edition, because they really don't add that much, and it's probably just more of a security blanket. And that was their response. I really appreciated those 2 responses. But Andrew Oliver actually set up a conference call, and I got to talk to 2 of his developers and got to ask them questions and stuff. And I asked them, has it ever failed on you? And Andrew actually piped up and said the only time he had a problem, he had to actually move back from 6 to 5. I'm working on 6 right now, but it was only because he was trying to use a third-party widget, for the lack of a better word, that didn't seem to work in 6, and that was his only problem. And I said that's fine. And it's kind of good for me because as a programmer I get to develop my own scheduling system. So, which is not, it doesn't sound that scary. It really isn't. I'm going to use Quartz, and it should take me maybe a month or so to get the whole thing straightened out, so I can actually just add in whatever transforms I have to do, or whatever jobs I have to do, and it runs it. So that's where we are now. We're going the free route, and I guess the lesson here is we've used open source for so long. Why was I afraid? I mean, we've used Hibernate, we've used Spring. Anyway, so we're going with the free version of Pentaho. Going to lag back a little. I'm using version 6 only because we're not getting into anything horribly difficult. But I think what we'll do is the advice that was given to me is, if a new version comes out, don't jump on it, because you won't get all the hot patches and stuff. So that's what we're doing. So anyway, that's the update. Thank you.
What was the other talk?
Hugo.
Do you want to? I want to see your blog and go.
Okay.
You don't have to.
I'll do it.
That was pretty
As long as
cool.
no one else is
I wanna
here
see it too.
wants to do it.
Oh, David wants to see it too, so you have to do it.
Yeah, I wanna see it. I wanna see Clojure.
Fine. This is not as exciting.
You can make it quick, and then we'll be done.
So I rewrote my blog again.
Wait, the camera.
Oh yeah. I rewrote my blog again because it was a new year.
Are there any posts on it?
Yeah, there's actually more to it now.
What did Alexa tell you to do?
This is my project before Alexa. Well,
Is he asleep?
this thing. Oh, okay, there we go. So I used to use this app this project. It's also an open source project called Jekyll, which is a static framework for generating a website, particularly a content website like a blog.
Thing gonna go away.
Oh, it's okay. I'm still in the setup.
There it goes.
We're still in Act 1.
Yeah.
I actually used a thing called Octopress, which is kind of a wrapper around Jekyll, which makes it slightly easier. And I built my own theme for it because I didn't like any of the ones you can get. And I actually used that for a couple years, so my joke about it being a new year wasn't really the reason. Anyways, so I started doing some Go things, which is really rare for me because I'm an iOS developer. So I've been building a server in Go, and I had a really good time with it, and I've heard about this thing called Hugo, which is a Go version of Jekyll. So it's built. It's the same concept, statically generated content, driven by Markdown. You have a folder of Markdown files, a folder called theme, and it basically merges them and creates a website, and then you upload that website to a website or to your server. So conceptually, it's really easy. Let me open it up here. What I like about it, though, go Hugo, gohugo.io. What I like about it is because it's Go, it's so fast, and we'll see that in a second because we'll write a blog post. What the heck? So actually, let's just do that. There's a lot of docs. It's very well documented. You just use Homebrew to install it, as you do with a lot of things on the Mac. It's Go, so it runs on other systems too. See, there's a penguin and a window. By the way, why isn't it called window instead of windows? Because I've only ever seen one window. Anyway.
Window panes.
Window panes.
Should be called
Four
panes.
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 The older ones, it's like a bunch that
Yeah.
are stacked, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Windows
Maybe,
10.
maybe you should call them hemorrhoids because it's a pain in the ass.
there you go.
Thank you. I'll be here all evening. Tip your wait staff. That's John Deal.
So I have this folder called janejosh.com, which is my website. And you can see it's basically, I have a folder with themes. I have a folder that has static stuff. So these are the things I just want to be wholesale copied over in the generation process. I have a folder called content, and I have a folder called layouts. And I have this TOML file. Those are the most important pieces. TOML is it's a configuration language, whatever they're called, like YAML or any of those types of things. Let's just look at it. It's really tiny. So you go through and you can just set up some properties that are like your whole site, right? So I set up like my base URL, language, pigment style, which is for code syntax highlighting. How many pages I want? It's just a lot of details. I set up some author information, and this I kind of define some of my own properties for my theme, which I'll get into, like Flickr, because I have a section in the bottom that has just my last 8 Flickr images. I have some params, so what sections do I want? These are also, you can define your own properties here, so I define these for my theme. So like, do I want to show the copyright? Do I want RSS enabled? Which sections do I want to enable on? And the way that Hugo works, it's slightly different from Jekyll, is the path that you put your stuff in matters. So actually I'll just show you here. So in my content, you'll see I have micro posts, photos, and posts. Those are just how I organize them, but those actually matter because that's the name of those sections. So that's how you can kind of organize your content. So it's really easy to just like kind of figure out just by looking at it really quick. You can define tags. I don't actually use this one, but you can I can have a series, and then you can define the menu. So my main menu, I have a link to posts, which just goes to that post folder, micro posts, which goes to that micro post, and photos, which goes to the photos. And I've given weights to them so I can sort them. So this way it goes posts, micro posts, photos. And because RSS was turned on all those, let me just show you my website. We'll see posts, micro posts, photos get rendered with RSS next to it. right? You can see me talking about my Sonos from a couple weeks ago. At least I've posted in April. Okay. So this is just this metadata about the thing. The theme uses this data and the contents of that contents folder to kind of build everything. Contents is simple. It's just markdown. So you have this little header stuff for date. Photos have a couple extra things, so like I tag location and camera. Regular posts have a little bit more title categories, the slug. So I poured this from my old blog and I changed the slug pattern so I can actually tell it what the old pattern was so that it gets rendered the same on my new one.
What is slug?
Just the URI so changeus.com/post/ by default it takes the name of the markdown file.
Gotcha.
And this is just markdown. So, and then you can have just top level pages. So like here's a page where I talk about Dvorak, which is just a page that just gets rendered. And these stats are really old. Don't judge me. Let's see. So anyways, that's the kind of idea. Then what's really cool though is that the front matter is what they call it. You can define what's required for each of those category types. So you can create what's called it's going to be under my themes. So I have the internet weblog theme, which is actually my theme encapsulated so anybody can use it. It has these archetypes. And what you could do is you could say for this archetype of a post, I want these front matter things. So when I hit the command line want to write a new post, you go new posts, because that's the folder I wanted in. Let's see, open source, open like .md. And there it created it. And if I look at the posts, really tiny, you'll see that it has some default ones already filled in. So you can kind of configure those archetypes for those different categories of content. But that's all you need to think about from a writing perspective. If you just want to write a blog, you say Hugo new blog, it generates a folder for you, just like Jekyll or Octopress does. But then it's a lot simpler because your content's just really top level instead of buried under like a source directory, and it gets a little weird. And if you've played with Jekyll, it's nice. I love it. It's just you have to think every time, especially if you write a blog rarely. Like, it's been 6 months. You're like, all right, how do I create a post again? And then there's like a rake task to tell you things, and you forget -t because you don't write Ruby every day, and then you're like Googling it. It's a bad story. Anyway, so that's part 1. That's Act 2. Act 3 was I wanted to take this time I wanted to make my theme reusable for other people. So I actually built this theme, which goes a little bit deeper into Hugo, because I have to be able to support all these different properties, right? So I have to define all these archetypes. So a micropost only needs date. A photo needs location. I forgot to add camera. Images are just like images that the theme cares about, which will end up getting copied into the static folder in the final output. Sorry, I'll zoom in over here. Layouts, which you can define layouts, so you can define custom layouts for each type. So as long as the user calls their type microposts, they'll get the same benefit. And this is what a single one will look like. So you do partials and just kind of construct the page from other pages. And then I pass the current context, that's what this is, the current context, to this one. And then if we look at that, partials, preview micropost, basically sticks the content in, gets the permalink, renders a date using Go's stupid date thing.
Only stupid ones.
It's actually cool, but
My stupid one.
it resulted in a late night tweet to Michael
Yeah.
saying, "What the heck?"
So is this like inline Go code?
Kind of, but no, not really. I mean, it kind of is, because you can do some things that actually simulate Go, but it's kind of their own layer, a really light layer over it. So, I don't know. What I really like about it is I'm gonna run this locally. So remember, this is taking all the markdown, turning it into, taking all the markdown, all those themes, merging it, rendering all those pages. That's it. It was that done.
Whoa.
It's already done.
Can you do that again? I blanked.
To be fair, I only have 50 posts, but even Jekyll would take, there's a second.
Takes a
Several
while.
seconds.
It's like a
Takes
second or
while,
two.
yeah.
All right, here we go. Done. So it's ridiculously fast. It's amazing.
104 milliseconds.
Yeah. So that's really what sold me on it more than anything else. And I was able to really quickly just understand the layout. And it's been a while since I've written this. And it was like, I think this was in January when I did this. And I still remember kind of how it all works. So it's a lot
That's pretty
easier.
good.
Yeah. I'm really happy with it.
You're like me. Your pages to categories ratio is fairly high.
Hey, look, there are 74 pages,
It's like
though, not 50.
2 to 1.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's actually, so the theme is open source. So there's, Hugo is open source, but my theme is also open source. Somewhere here I talk about it. Oh yeah, I have this footer. And this is my daughter. She went to prom. So this is the Tesla I ordered. I'm gonna be 40 by the time it gets here.
Yeah. Is there a problem looking for it?
Yes. Anyway, so that's all comes part of it. So, so I registered with the Hugo people. Basically, just a pull request on their thing. But if you go Hugo themes Hugo, they have their own theme site with a lot of different themes. And somewhere in here, you should see mine, unless they took me down.
These look cooler than Jekyll themes.
Yeah, I've been happy with
They're
that.
way cooler than Jekyll.
They're definitely cooler. Come on, where is it? There it is. So here, so then the theme's online, and you can look at it. And it's on GitHub. But you can also demo it with not my data and see what it looks like when someone else tries to render it. And you can see it mostly holds up. They basically have a static content that they try to just run through every theme, so it doesn't have things like that first name. They just have names, so that's why it's at whatever, because I created my own property for that. But what's cool is, and you can see, this just pulls the latest off of Flickr, so it doesn't do that. Oh, two cool things is, I can provide a partial in my template. Like this one here is called bio.html, which is just an HTML thing there. You can write like some links about yourself. If you remember mine, it was like, has something different. What's really cool is you can override it. So my template has one that just has some help information, but my theme actually overrides that partial, or I'm sorry, my instance of my blog overrides that partial. So that's why mine gets rendered instead of the one. So you can kind of build your own, I don't want to say inheritance, but like,
More leverage on the
you have some more leverage on the themes, because you could just, if you don't like how a theme is doing something, you can just override that whole piece. So for example, a great way to think about it, let's say you have a theme that you really love, but you hate how they render the blog post. Well, you find which partial they use to render that and just wholesale replace it and fix it. So, and then the other thing is on GitHub, of course, is all of my private repos, but also Internet Weblog. And I wrote some really good documentation just on how to set it up and like what all those different properties mean and why I use it with like recommendations and tables about what they all mean. So pretty easy to get set up even with my custom use of properties. Anyway, that's my blog. Maybe I should write more. Any questions?
How do you deploy it? Does it
Um,
have like a built-in thing for that?
it outputs just a folder of HTML. So you could deploy it with rsync if you want.
Ah.
I actually deploy it with Travis. So let's go back. So I have a Travis YAML. Is anyone familiar with Travis? Okay. It's basically a CI that you can automate and connect with GitHub. So basically this defines the rules of how I want to deploy it with all my passwords encoded so you guys can't steal it.
CI being continuous integration.
Yep. And basically when I commit, I write a post, I push it to GitHub, and in 1 to 20 minutes, it's live. If it's in the middle of the day, it's 20 minutes. If it's at night, it's like really quick. So.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Did you ever pass through Pelican as a blog post with static generator engine choice?
I feel like I've heard of it, but I never went.
It's a Python one. It's in the same kind of constellation as Jekyll and Hyde and
Octopress.
I noticed that one of the themes up there was called Hyde or something.
Yeah, well, that's what happens is, actually, I've seen this on all of them, right? They every single one someone will create. This is the theme from Octopress converted to
Right.
Go or Hugo.
I used Jekyll and Octopress.
So, yeah. Anyway, any other questions? Cool. Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, I think that's it. Thanks for coming. Come next time.
Thanks for
Bring your
hosting.
friends.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thanks for it.
Where's Scott?
He said he couldn't make it today.
Freaking Scott.
Thanks for the beer.
No problem. If you want to take some pizza home, go ahead. If you want to hang out and chat, feel free.
Thanks in advance for this next one. Now we're at one last round.
Go for it.
Here we go.
This is really good. This is really good.
Hey,